There, everybody. My name is Steve with Aquaponics, and today we're going to talk about how aquaponic production can increase the flavor of your plants, increase the speed of production, and increase your profits. We're also going to talk a little bit about some clean natural farming inputs, some of the different programs that we're working on to try and help provide more free resources for growers, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff that I think you guys are going to be interested in. So thanks a lot for joining us today. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Steve from Aquaponics. I'm also the host of the Growing with Fishes podcast. We've been going now for almost 7 years. And I'm also the founder and owner of Aquaponics. I've worked worldwide. I'm currently living in Thailand. But I've also worked in Jamaica, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Canada, all across the United States, and a whole bunch of other fun places. So rather than boring you with a long list of different places I've worked at, let's jump right to it. So what is aquaponics? Aquaponics is utilizing fish waste in order to grow plants, utilizing microbes, in this case, aquatic microbes in aquaponics, as compared to terrestrial microbes, as you'd find in something like soil. This allows us, again, to get mostly nitrates for our plants. The nitrogen form in aquatic solutions is generally in nitrate form versus terrestrial, which tends to be a little bit more towards ammonia. So some nitrates there, but much more on the ammonia and nitrite side. Again, mainly ammonia. So aquaponics can provide a whole bunch of different benefits, and we're going to talk about quite a few of those, as well as why they provide those benefits. So I think you guys are going to learn a whole lot today, and gals, and whatever else it is that's of you in the event today, however it is that you vibe. All right. Why use aquaponics? Aquaponics uses an average of 18% water compared to other sources. I know often it's put out there that it's 10% uses 10% of the water. And in real world solutions, at least with cannabis, it tends to be about 18 to 20% of the water. The plants just drink a lot, and I think there's a little bit of variability there that they just didn't account for. These university setups, they can get creative with some of their numbers, and that aren't exactly comparable to real world the commercial production. We see this a lot in cannabis. We tend to utilize between 10 and 15% of the supplemental nutrients, significantly less nutrients. We're running at total ppm levels between 400 and 800, or even on the extreme end. As far as mineral solutions go, most of the time between the 400 to 600 range. So, and again, that's mainly maintaining pH and your base micronutrient levels, and then your iron. That's really all that is. There's nothing crazy. It's just that the fact that when you have all of those aquatic microbes, you're providing it in basically a compost tea solution and making it hyper available, which is really wonderful. For those that are not wanting to tend to the soil and balance nutrients and all these things. It's much simpler with aquaponics. You send your water sample out, you adjust it, and then you go from there. It's not very difficult. Again, when you do dose, you're making minute changes in your small 5 to 15 parts per million adjustments. Nothing large compared to soil, where you can really change that quite dramatically and have a often need to. Additional revenue streams with fish, you can sell those, especially if you get into some of the tropicals and exotics. We'll talk about that. Mineralizing fish waste and inoculated water can also help pay the bills. We also have quite a wider range of hemavar expression. We tend to get better total terpenes, on average between 35 and 300% increase in terpenes compared to soil controls, depending on what cultivar we're talking about. Most of them are in that 35 to 75% range. Few of them really shine once you get them into the aquaponics. CBD can increase by as much as 100%. Completely, doubling over, going from a 4% strain to an 8% strain. We've seen that multiple times. We've also seen quite a bit of a difference in THCV production, CBDV production, some of the minor cannabinoids and terpenes, and then also just radically different terpene profiles out of the same cultivar and side-by-sides, especially with neridol, cis-neridol and trans-neridol. If you're chasing those terpenes for whatever medical reason, they don't even come close to the number. I mean, we've hit almost a full percentage point with the transnaridol in some strains now in aquaponics. So, and that certainly has a lot of application for certain neurological disorders. So I think it's a very exciting. I think that you could see very hyper catered production for specific types of products in the future, taking advantage of this. You also have there's undeniable honesty when it comes to aquaponics. If I cheat and start using crazy chemical stuff, I'm going to kill all the fish, and then the system collapses. You can see here's a picture of a frog, 2 different frogs that were found in a greenhouse that I was out working in Oklahoma. So you're not going to have tree frogs operating if you're using toxic, harsh IPM, right? So this is the type of honesty that you have with aquaponics. It's why you don't really have to go for that organic certification. What do you need it for? You already have the fact that the system works is proof enough that you're being honest about it. So most of the systems that we're utilizing now are using either a flood and drain, either with a bell siphon or with what we also like to call a loop siphon, which is where you drain out the bottom and then just put a loop on it down, similar to like how this is working, except instead of having a drain here, you just have a bottom out with a loop that goes up to the top of the loop is the height of the water. So it just kind of gives you 2 different options. The reason why I like these mechanical ones over, these physics-based ones versus mechanical timers and mechanical indexing valves and things like that is these don't fail. If physics fails on the planet, we have way bigger problems than worrying about our aquaponic system, whereas these will not fail on you once you get them tuned right. I know people get frustrated tuning their bell siphons. It's because most of them are using the wrong design with the stupid little snorkels that cause more problems than they solve. Alrighty, so you have what are the different components of aquaponics? We have a media, lava rock or clay leca in the case of the picture here. You have a grow bed. You have your sump tank, which is where all the water flows back to. Your sump tank should be 125% of or more of your total media bed volume when I apologize there when your media bed is filled 50%. So remember, the media is going to displace about 50% of the water from the grow bed approximately. So just assume it's going to displace 50%, for mathematical purposes. As long as your sump tank can maintain 50% of your total media bed volume, plus an additional 25% to ensure that you don't burn the pump out at the bottom. That's how you determine your grow bed size to sump size, and then your fish tanks, you scale off of that. And then you're going to have a radial flow filter, which will look similar to this. And then you'll have your mineralization tank, which is what this is, which allows you to break down that fish waste much more rapidly, add things like natural farming inputs or other microbial inputs, and really, take advantage of that mineralization process and start to cater it and bend it to the way that you want it. So this is the main design that we use now for all commercial operations. So we have you can see here the return loop that goes back to the start of the system is in red, and then you have the feed loop coming off the pumps is in yellow. Each of these fish tanks can run to any of these sump tanks. Each sump tank is paired with a single one on the end as well. That can be auxiliary to whichever one needs it. And then these can be run in any combination to the nursery or to each bay. So this allows you to basically allow 2 or 3, maybe 3 fish tanks in the beginning of veg, cut it down to 2 at transition, and then the last half of flower run just a single fish tank or even no fish tanks off of that sump, so that you don't have that extra nitrogen. You can cut that down without throttling down the rest of the nutrients in the solution. So it really does offer, it's kind of a hybrid of decoupled and coupled. The systems are always coupled. It's just a matter of how many fish tanks we're coupling to a single system. So it really, in my opinion, is the better way for larger commercial operations to manage their nutrients. And here's a build out of one that we did in Oklahoma. You can see here the drain lines all buried. So these are the returns. These are the fill lines and the frames. And we deal with some pretty large fish tanks, as you can see here. We don't play. So those are our big auxiliary fish tanks, also functioning as sumps, when you get to that size. You can see there's also a drain there. And this is the inside of our fish house. See the radial flow filters here. These pump out into these mixed tanks, mineralization tanks, and then these mineralization tanks pump into one of 3 different outputs. And you can see here the different returns going to the different sub tanks out of the greenhouse there. So that's what it looked like before getting framed out. As she is all packed in. The pictures are a little deceivingly narrow because of the cropping. There is a little more room in there than it looks in the pictures. All right, so all right, so you have aquaponics versus hydroponics. So you can see here, aquaponics is going to give you a much better microbial delivery, lower total nutrients needed for your plants, better terpene expression, better flavonoid expression, lower overhead costs, additional revenue streams, much higher terpene expression. Again, we talked about that earlier. Hydroponics, you have no microbials to assist the nutrients, you have much higher nutrient ppms that are needed in order to hit, get the plants to actually do what they're supposed to do. Much more susceptible to pathogens and diseases because you have that sterility and those imbalances going on all the time. You have a loss of terpene expression. You're never going to see a hydroponic plant that comes even close to an aquaponic or living soil plant in terms of total terpenes. It's just not going to happen. Those terpenes are activated by specific genes that are only activated if there's something there to trigger them. And we don't even understand how half of these work yet, but what we do know is that they're triggered by other microbes. So by having those beneficial microbes, like adding things like liquid IMO from Korean natural farming, or EM1, or effective microbes from a bottled source, or any of your other compost tea even is going to help boost those microbials. Although compost tea we don't generally recommend as much for aquaponics, but even in soil you're not going to have those soil microbes that are going to trigger those responses for those secondary metabolites that we call terpenes, and fewer revenue streams as well with hydroponics. All right, so think of microbes and nutrients kind of like a chef at a restaurant versus a chef in a food truck. A chef in a restaurant, okay, let's talk about this first, sorry. A chef in the food truck, sorry, it's a little bit late where I am with all the time stuff and being in Thailand. So you have your chef in the food truck and he can serve, 5 customers every 5 or 10 minutes. The chef in the restaurant has his, prep chefs and sous chefs and, a hostess and a host and, bus boys and a bartender and all these different things. So those are all the support staff kind of acts like microbes to help that single chef serve now 20, 30, 40, 50 people in that same, 10-15 minute window. Certainly in terms of getting them, maybe not immediately completely served, but, effectively delivering all those on a sane timeline. Whereas, you're much less efficient with a food truck where you have one guy, just helping people one at a time. And that's kind of the difference between hydroponics and living soil or aquaponics. You have a food truck kind of thing where you have a very, you have to use a lot more food trucks to serve the same number of people. So you have to have much higher ppms versus a restaurant, which has all that other support staff. That way you have microbes where you can have much fewer chefs, serve a much larger number of people, in this case, plants, with a wider range of nutrients. So that's how that kind of works in a way you can kind of think about it in terms of delivery, bioavailability. I know people often struggle with the concept of bioavailability, and I find that bringing it down to the food level often makes it very relatable for people. So people often talk about, well, how can aquaponics be organic? And how can hydroponics, as they often call it, they don't even acknowledge that it's microbially dominated. They'll call it hydroponics. Can be organic or otherwise biodiverse. Well, NASA did a study with and actually tested a wide range of different DNA A lot of that information was used in a study put together in 2017 with the soil versus soilless organic debate and submitted to the USDA. What they found was aquaponics on average is 168% more total microbial biodiversity than even the best living soil operations that were running organic on organic farms. So if we're going to talk about microbial biodiversity, you kind of got a beat there. Aquaponics kind of beats pretty much everything. They also found that none of the microbial food webs were identical across any of them. In fact, most of them were radically different. The only two that were even close were a koi farm across the street from an aquaponics farm. So there's a much more microbial biodiversity of the aquatic microbes than with the terrestrial microbes, which makes it even more exciting when you're doing things like studying and trying to map this stuff out. I'm actually currently working with a gentleman named Matt Powers, and we're sending him samples with a bunch of my clients to try and get him more bioavailable or more biology into his testing lab so that he can test out more of the aquaponic food web stuff, because he has access to incredible DNA sequencers that are well beyond what I have access to here in Thailand. So definitely check him out if you're looking to get some answers for your own aquaponic systems. All right, so dual root zone. This has really been the key for us to succeed with our aquaponic production of any kind of higher nutrient feeding crop, be it fruit trees, specific plants that are, just a pain in the butt that have weird nutrient requirements, or your cannabis in the case that we're talking about today. So what we would do is we have the top half here is soil. We have a separation layer of burlap, and then below that is hydrogen or lava rock or some other type of media. The water floods and drains and goes up and down here. And what that does is creates a vacuum. When that water goes down, it drafts fresh air in through the soil and causes like a respiration lung kind of action. When the water goes back up in a flood and drain cycle, it forces out all that air that was down there before and basically gets rid of it so that you can draft fresh air back in. So you're getting this, kind of diaphragm action going on in the root system that allows for accelerated gas exchange well beyond what you can get on anything except for maybe an aeroponic system. So it really gives you a huge advantage in terms of growth speed. But you can also see here, the plants are just massive. The roots are huge. They do extremely well. That's Bain. He's the head grower over at Vertica Aquaponics in Oklahoma. They are currently the largest aquaponic cannabis operation, as far as I'm aware, in the United States, but certainly Oklahoma. So definitely check him out. He's a great guy. I've been working with him for a long time, many different operations. Definitely a good dude. But that's basically how it works. So then you have all the terrestrial microbes up here, your mycorrhizae, your protists, and other different things that live in the soil. You have your aquatic microbiome that's down here. So you're kind of getting access to two different things to stimulate the plant's immune system. What does that do? More secondary metabolites for the plant. And what does that translate into? More flavonoids, terpenes, and cannabinoids for us to enjoy at the end of the day. The whole trick to increasing terpenes and all that kind of expression is increasing the number of non-pathogenic microbes in the root system to trigger those genes to turn on in a way that's not going to negatively impact plant growth. And that's really what this is all about, is trying to create a second biome in the soil zone to kind of stack those different secondary metabolite expressions in the genome of the plant. Hopefully that is easy to digest for you guys at home. All right, so you can see here, we have the 5 different controls of dual roots and aquaponics. So we can go ahead and dose directly into the water. If we want to add some like DTPA iron, we'll use as an example. We can do a soil mix. We can do something like Coots mix or a super soil mix. We can go with a custom soil mix. We can water things into the soil, so we can top dress. We can foliar spray the plants, or we can change up the fish food. Remember, the higher the protein that goes into the fish, the higher the nitrogen levels coming back out of the fish. So you can use that protein content of your feed to kind of adjust that nitrogen up and down. You can see here on the bottom is our very first side-by-side we ran at the Aquaponics source. If you were lucky enough to be at the Aquaponics Fest, you got a chance to see these plants alive before we dissected them. You can see here the bottom tomato was significantly better than the top one. It had 44% more flower sites and 38% more total fruit before we cut it down. These are both clones that started off with the same number of leaves and branches that we took off of just a plant from the showroom. So, and they weighed almost the same. They were within a half a gram of weight when we put the clones in to the bed originally. So they were as identical as we could possibly make them before we put them in there. But you can see here that additional soil really triggered a huge difference in root expression just by simply being there. Even the base part was significantly more gnarly than the other one was. So you can see here we use a lot of commercial dual root zone production now. This is a converted lettuce facility. They were producing 14,000 clones a week before they had some other non-plant related issues that caused them to shut down for a while due to, well, we want to get into their personal business, but yeah, they had some issues that weren't plant related. But you can see here the grow worked extremely well. And it does work extremely well when you have, the whole place set up right. So this is just lettuce rafts that we put the dual root zone pots on directly on top of, let the roots grow down into the DWC. And you can see here that we were getting 3 to 4 inches of growth per day and cutting, hundreds of clones per mom per day or per week rather. It was quite amazing. Good little factory we had there for a while. And you can see here, this is a picture from a flowering room. You can see here, it's just looks like a pine forest in northern Canada or something in winter. Just covered in crystals, stacked for days, and nothing but colas. That's how it should look, right near harvest. Once you've de-leafed most of it, waiting those last couple of days for the buds to ripen. You can see here on the right, some more wonderful colas. All right. So you can see here's another set of dual root zone stuff. This is Marty, our co-host of the Growing with Fishes podcast. You can see here, this is one of our side-by-sides. If you're ever to take any of our education courses, you'll see this in the mineral and microbe class, as well as the aquaponic cannabis class. We have side-by-sides with this and other beds as well, where we showed you with and without dual root zone and with and without nutrient supplementation. So don't make that mistake. And this is a ZBD hemp in Colorado. And then this is more pictures from Vertica. So that you can see here, monster colas. Again, anyone that says aquaponics doesn't produce good yields, you can tell them you've seen otherwise. Here's, again, another picture from Vertica Aquaponics in Oklahoma, just killing it, these are roller tables that are just running a very shallow flood and drain. And then they also run a drip line on top to top dress. They are, I believe, switched over to blue mats now, just to make things a little bit more automated. But it works extremely well for top dressing, and then for your flood and drain, just to give the bottom some amount of water. These are running about 4 or 5 inch beds compared to the normal 12-inch beds that we normally run, but it works just as well. You don't really have to flood and drain them quite as deep as I think a lot of people think you do. The speed of growth per year. So you can see here we're getting very, very rapid growth here. These were taken about a week apart. It was 8 days apart. So you can see you're going from tiny little starts to completely buried in a little over a week. So just kills it. When you're getting this type of growth and all the right node spacing and all that, you can cut double, triple, quadruple the number of clones that you're taking before, and really peak out production, really cram in a whole bunch of smaller plants into your flower rooms, not really veg them as long, and just pack those plants in there and get that better production. There's quite a bit of studies now showing that the optimal production is really around 4 to 4 gallons as far as the soil goes, and aquaponics we can hit that 3 to 4 gallons. Most of the stuff we're running is either 3 gallon or 5 gallon for production, so it works extremely well. But we're getting twice the speed of growth in veg and 8 to 15% flowering times faster, and we're also getting faster in some cases as much as 20 to 25% faster flowering time. So That really just depends. I know that one of the other things, and I know other people have spoken on this too, is the root temperature of the water. If you run a little bit warmer temperatures, it seems like it finishes them up a little bit quicker. So that's some of the other stuff that we've been working on around that. So what gives your cannabis plants flavor? You know, what gives them the pizzazz? Or what makes it different than the other things that you're growing? Well, it says terpenes and flavonoids and secondary metabolites, you know, lipids, alkaloids, saponins, and phenols. How do we increase those? Well, those are all responses to outside stimuli, you know, environment, UV, temperature, wind, insect attack, all number of different things. So we can stimulate those as much as we can safely by doubling the number of microbiomes in the case of dual root zone aquaponics, or adding things like liquid IMO or IMO directly to the soil layer, or soil in your soil solutions to stimulate those genes that produce those compounds to help fight against things it thinks it's going to have to deal with or protect itself against. So that's how it goes about doing it. And again, with dual root zone aquaponics, we can really maximize that specific mechanism in a way that's, you know, unique compared to any other type of production method. And you can see here, you know, we get very, very, very dense, you know, trichome densities out of all of our plants. So, you know, we certainly, you know, can stand behind our products. So how does it increase flavor in cannabis, especially aquaponics? So this is something you often hear from hydroponics. So hydroponic, you know, lettuce, any other tomatoes, whatever else, they often lack flavor. Well, we don't have that problem in aquaponics. And, you know, you can ask anyone who's ever had aquaponic lettuce, the first thing they tell you is, wow, it says flavor. We can get that same kind of pizzazz with the aquaponics. Again, we've talked about a little bit earlier. There's a lot of different microbes that we have no idea about yet in terms of individual species and things like that. As far as what's stimulating these. And remember, 75% of these microbes from your aquaponic system will live happily in your soil. So we can take, you know, nutrient solutions or even teas or even just watering straight from an aquaculture system. There's something as basic as that, or even in aquariums, you know, at the home scale, taking your aquarium water change water from freshwater aquariums that aren't African cichlid tanks. And using them in your garden. I know that's how I got started doing aquaponics with cannabis way back in the day. These are all ways that you can utilize and take advantage of those aquatic microbiomes to boost productions of your plants, boost flavors and flavonoid compounds in your plants, and really, you know, bring those plants up to the next level. You know, really get, I mean, look at the color on this plant, you know, early on in flower. You know, you're not going to get that if you don't have your nutrients dialed in and your microbes there to trigger that response right away. So this is really what I think people are missing with a lot of their different recipes and things like that out there. And certainly one that we see huge benefits with in aquaponics. And we also do things like like we talked about before, adding different green natural farming inputs to further diversify that. So again, like we talked about, you have your terrestrial microbiome, your mycorrhizae, your mineralizing microbes, you have your aquatic microbiome, and then you have that accelerated gas exchange. And that combination of those three things means that all of those microbes are getting the best gas exchange they can get. They can replicate as fast as they can. And I know everything's kind of going, you know, full throttle at all times in the root zone. Really don't have that advantage with. And you can apply this to hydroponics. You know, if you just want to do living soil and hydro and not deal with the fish, maybe you don't want to, you know, you have something about, you think aquariums or fish prisons or I don't know, whatever crazy stuff it is that you believe. You know, that's fine. You can totally do this with the other methods. But the idea is that having that whole methodology with that gas exchange and the microbials and that whole system really will do wonders. And it's allowed us to grow a whole bunch of different plants that people say you can't grow in aquaponics. We've managed to grow ocha root, which is a highly medicinal plant that grows and is mostly wild harvested right now. We've managed to grow all manners of different berries, fruit trees, you name it. We've managed to grow it because you can have that mycorrhizal layer that a lot of these plants that are really hard and tricky to grow have specific microbes you have to keep in the root zone, or they don't do well. So it's definitely a great way to cater that upper soil layer to literally any type of crop that you might want to put in an aquaponic system for. It doesn't even have to be cannabis. So we see huge THC and huge cannabinoid boosts, on average 15% increase in THC. We've seen total yields increase by as much as 52% in aquaponics compared to the soil controls. We've also seen aquaponic water used in living soil compared to just regular old dechlorinated water, and having almost identical yield increases as well. So it's not even just about building a recirculating liquid system. You can literally just set up the aquaculture portion of it and water your plants at least through the first half of flower, or first quarter of flower, and have those same exact results, and not have to deal with some of the additional equipment side. You just don't have all the profit benefits and kind of the ease of having that recirculating system, which does allow for a lot of automation that you don't normally get with some of the other types of systems. We also get a huge increase in THCV, CBDV, CBG, CBC, increase in alcohol-bonded cannabinoids like CBT, and a huge increase in CBD, on average 30% increase, but as much as 100% in some methods. We also see a slight increase in growth speed in the media beds compared to DWC. DWC tends to be about 15 to 20% slower than the flood and drain. And I think that, again, that just has to do with the gas exchange. You're not getting that breathing action in the soil. There's a couple of main models that we're using right now for most of our commercial operations. Currently we run a clone and nursery operation in quite a few of the different places. Again, with the faster veg speed, this really is the best way to profit off of aquaponics. You can really crank clones out at an insane level compared to any other type of method. There's nothing else that's going to produce clones as fast as aquaponics. We've tried it side by side against pretty much everything at this point. And again, a lot of these different markets, Oklahoma or where I'm in Thailand, we can sell as many clones as we want to, as long as the buyer is licensed. So, if you have a more open and freer market, this definitely can be your best business model. And then your other model is obviously flower production. So maximizing square footage. We've moved all to mostly roller tables for any serious size facility, greenhouse or indoor. If you're not doing roller tables in that type of setting at this point, you're wasting space. Scrogging is definitely recommended. Doing multiple rooms so that you can have those staggered harvests and constant production is another big thing that we see a lot now. Being a very important factor. You got to keep those shelves filled, or you lose that shelf space, which I think a lot of you guys have found out one way or the other. Accelerated strain selection, again, by having that faster growth speed, we can immediately start sifting through strains and breeding strains at 50% faster than anybody else can. So that gives us a huge market advantage, being a couple of weeks ahead of the market on seed production, things like that. Increased seed production as well, as much as 15% increase in seed production against our soil controls with the same cuts of the same males and the same moms. So that's been another interesting thing. It seems like the nitrate packs on a few more of the seeds into the plants compared to the soil systems. Yeah. But a huge amount of beneficial fungi. We get these mostly from our IMOs, but also from, sometimes we'll inoculate stuff with different things, but you can easily grow them in the living soil in the upper portion of the systems. Is something that we see almost every day. I know here in Thailand, we see them every single day. And in Oklahoma, we saw them almost every day. So always fun to see. But these also help increase flavonoid and terpene production. They're going to outcompete bad pathogens, things like septoria, root rot, and other bad things are going to be outcompeted by these beneficial fungi. We've also run hybrid systems. So if you guys have ever seen, there used to be a big facility out in Colorado. I can't remember, Little River, I think it was. No, not Little River, South River Aquaponics. They used to have a bigger version of this, but this is the guy that started that whole thing. I worked with him for a bit in Oklahoma and Colorado, running these CO2 chambers. And you can see here at the bottom is a fish tank. So this is where the younger fish lived, and they would eat all the fitzels, the little stuff that's not quite big enough for us to use. We'd harvest off the big ones, knock the little stuff into the water. The fish get fed, it's high protein. And then there's at the bottom of this, right kind of above water level, there's a vent system. So there's like a whole series of, it looks almost like computer fans, but they're waterproof. It kicks on based off a CO2 sensor. So when the CO2 builds up to a certain level, it vents that CO2 out into air lines that are then spread above the plants in the greenhouse, which is adjacent to this. So there's it kind of basically builds up CO2 and dumps it out, builds it up CO2 and dumps it out, so that it doesn't get too high in there for the fish. The fish can survive quite a bit more because the water is being oxygenated, but that CO2 builds up at the bottom of the chamber, and allows us to kind of vent that off and produce CO2 from and food production at the same time, rather than buying a petroleum product, which I think is a much better way to, if you ask me, growing mushrooms is a much more sustainable way to produce CO2 for our plants than using petroleum. But certainly one of the cool things that you can do and hybridize your systems to be more of a eco-centric product. If you have cannabis and you have some vegetables and you have mushrooms, well, now you have like a little farmer's market and your dispensary all going, even if they're two separate buildings or whatever you have to do to be compliant. You get the gist of it, is you can kind of build a story around that for your farm. And that can really help with your branding and getting your message out as well. Also, the best thing you can put in your dispensary is a classroom. If you're building a dispensary, for the love of God, please put dispensaries in there, or put a classroom in your dispensary. You will absolutely not regret it. All right, fish species. So your fish species, the best one that we like to use is tilapia, obviously. The next best one is goldfish and koi. Butterfly koi have the best resale value. So if you're strictly after money, butterfly koi are what you're after. You're going to get quite a bit of dollars per every inch gained on a butterfly koi compared to a tilapia or something like that. Panfish can also be a great option. Bluegills, yellow perch, all those guys are great. Lastly, pacu are the other good one. You can also, Craigslist a lot of your oversized aquarium orphans, red-tail catfish, tiger shovel nose catfish, iridescent sharks. There's a whole bunch of freshwater fish that people shouldn't have, but they're on the trade, so it is what it is. But you can, provide those fish a good home with your aquaponic system. Again, tropical fish, I think we touched on a little bit earlier, that can be really the most profitable. So if you got into something like some of the fancier arapaima or arowanas, or any of the other funkier, larger freshwater fish, especially arowanas, just because they have such a high resale value in the Asian market, you really can turn almost more of a profit off of them than you do your cannabis operation if you breed them right. So definitely something to look out for. I mean, there's quite a few arowanas now selling for $1,000 plus. So there's some selling for $40,000 plus now too. So, but there's, it's not hard to get a couple $100 per fish if you start doing some, a little bit of investment in the right parentage. All right, so did I skip the? Yeah, we're good. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, and I forgot that this is important with the fish species. So your meat processing. This is a huge licensing problem that hopefully will get fixed here with the feds pretty quickly. But currently, you can't get a meat processing license if you're a cannabis operation. So be sure you have a separate EIN number, a tax ID number for your property. Separate business registry and a plot license for your meat processing from your cannabis operation, because otherwise they can be a huge pain, because meat processors can't enter a Schedule 1 facility still until they deschedule it. So fingers crossed the DEA makes that happen soon, eh? All right, so increased profits. Again, you have increased revenue streams. The fish, you can sell mineralized fish waste. You can sell mineralized brews that you make up after that and add your own minerals to them. You can sell microbial inputs. You can do seed start sponges and things like that in your in your different sections, in your sumps and stuff. And a whole lot more can, again, provide a whole bunch of additional ways to help keep the bills paid. Each one's not going to, fish will give you a couple thousand a year. Even bigger operations aren't making that much money off the fish, but hey, they help, they at least cover the cost of the fish feed. Now your fertilizer's paid. Well, that's a huge chunk of your bill for a normal cannabis grower, right? Aside from water and whatever else. So it really helps, goes to show, and it gives you a great way to reach out to the community. You can donate a lot of those fish to your local food pantry. You can, when you say you're going up for a license against other people in a market where there's only, there's 12 of you and 6 licenses being granted. Well, if you're the guy that wants to come in and donate a percentage of the fish production and grow as much meat as everybody else, who do you think they're going to give a license to? You're going to get a license, a large percentage. Obviously, there's local politics involved, but you're going to get a license a large percentage of the time because you're providing good to the community. And I'm a big fan of the whole greed for good thing. If we could take some of the greed from the cannabis industry, provide good for our local communities, especially with methods like aquaponics, where it's directly related to the local community. There's not this shipping thing and carbon footprint and all the rest of it. It's no, here's the facility where we're giving the fish away directly to the people that live in that community. It's none of this, moving money around hocus pocus stuff that we see happen all too often with people that are quote unquote helping people. It's a way to directly do that and prove that you're doing it in a local community, which again, without vicious some of this licensing can be a godsend when you're trying to fight for a license. Higher terpene levels mean better price per pound. Anyone that's been selling pounds knows the price has come down quite a bit. It can help you maintain a bit of a floor on that pricing. Faster flowering times means you can eke out an extra half a run to run a year. And help bring in extra money, which certainly, again, we can all use right now in the cannabis industry. And sustainable production means, just a better world for everybody. What can aquaponics provide for soil operations? Well, it can be a great nursery. Say you want to do something like the field behind me there in the picture. You can absolutely just set up your clone facility as your aquaponics facility and then kick them out to the soil. There's a lot of places doing that now, especially bigger operations that started off, as a little lettuce operation and really grown quite a bit since then. A lot of them, simply haven't had the extra cash quite yet to reinvest in that infrastructure, or they do, but the shipping times with COVID and all the other happy, goofy stuff that's happened has kind of prevented a lot of that shipping times and construction from happening on the time scales they wanted. It's allowed them to still get plants into production and still get stuff going without having to deal with the headache of waiting on things. You can absolutely use aquaculture for providing nutrients for fields. We actually recently did a hay trial where we did a 10-acre control with aquaponics and aquaponic fed water on 2 applications. I think it was 6 months apart on a plot. I have to remember what the exact timing was on it, but it was 6 months apart when we watered, once in the winter, once in the summer. And then we had another plot that was 100 acres. It was on the same property. 10 acres produced more bales of hay than the 100 acres did. And part of that had to do with the drought, but it wasn't even the same color. Like it was just so much denser. It was just almost comical. So even just in the soil application, I think you're going to see that going into the future being a much more bigger factor, especially with the global strife that's going on right now. We really need to rely on a homegrown fertilizer production and just to feed people in America. And I think that this really can provide kind of a middle ground and kind of bridge people into aquaponics more, just by giving them the soil solutions that they need, at least for now. It can accelerate your breeding programs. We talked about that earlier. It can also increase your total seed production, more seeds per pollination. Again, we've seen on average 15% increase in total seed counts. Again, we're trying to be as equal as we can and with controls. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about some KNF stuff. This is something that I think everyone needs to learn more about. Something that I think that we can all benefit from, be it soil or aquaponics. Lactobacillus ferment serums. If you aren't familiar with them, they're amazing. Great for powdery mildew. We've also found in aquaponics, they like to eat Pythium, E. coli, and Salmonella. So if you're worried about food safety in any of your plant production that's non-cannabis, or you're going to be using cannabis for your things like salads or leafy green type application, which they do in Thailand, all over the place. You can get fan leaves, or you'll just get a salad and we'll have fan leaves. It's pretty wild. It's quite liberal here at the moment. We'll see if they rein that in, but we're spoiled, at least for now. It also increases plant growth production by 12 to 20%, in terms of total yield off of crops. Also increases fish production by the same amount. Fish really pack it on. The other cool thing is with lactobacillus is all that curds off the top of the lab production can immediately be fed back to the fish. Is just a great way to fatten your fish up. It's fat and protein. It's wonderful as a fish food. So University of Kentucky did a study on lactobacillus and found that they were the ones that started finding out some of the funky stuff. And then we've since used it to treat E. coli and a couple of different facilities now that were mainly lettuce facilities that were running into a non-human pathogenic E. coli. Yeah, it certainly is an amazing stuff. And it's basically just the lactobacillic acid from milk or yogurt. If you ever had yogurt, you eat this already. It's nothing particularly special, but when you apply it to plants, it has a lot of vitamin B as a byproduct, and that helps as a growth accelerant. The lactobacillus itself loves to consume a lot of the things that will harm your plant, like your bad molds, septoria, botrytis, fusarium, all of these things. It will actively feed on and help eliminate from your garden. So especially if you had a bad deal last year, really, hit it hard with a good, dose or two of lactobacillus in order to eliminate that, and you'll be happy you did. You can make this as simple as just going and getting some probiotics, dropping it in some milk and letting it separate. And then I like to partially unscrew the cap and just let it drain out through the thing into whatever my bowl is and then pour it into the system. We're using lactobacillus and aquaponics at a 1 to 1,000 rate. So 1 gallon of labs per 1,000 gallons of system volume. And you would use that at the same rate for your other stuff as well. Again, treats powdery mildew, botrytis, fusarium, pythium, and prevents septoria. You can also make it from kefir. So here's your labs recipe. I won't bore you by reading the whole thing, but you can go ahead and screenshot that or copy it for yourself so that you can make it later. Again, it's just a little too long to read through, but I try to give people the instruction manual of the recipe. So here's your curds. Again, your curd is the fat at the top. The labs is the part at the bottom. You want the clearer part, not the thick white part. And this is good dog food, cat food, chicken food, children food, human food, whatever, but it's good fish food too. This is what it'll do to your soil. And then we also like to make something I came up with, super labs. So this is adding spirulina and kelp to your lactobacillus, and this isolates the phycocyanin, which accelerates your chlorophyll production in the plants. So you have isolated phycocyanin with the vitamin B and the lactobacillus benefits. And now you have 3 different things that are just accelerating this plant's growth rate like crazy. Aside from the benefits from the kelp and the spirulina and isolated phycocyanin and the vitamin B from the labs. So you have all these different things that are just pushing this plant going, go, 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 go. So we've had this resurrect dead plants, like dead pepper plants that were bone dry, and they had new leaf growth after 3 days out of new branches growing out of every leaf node after 3 days. I've never seen anything do anything like that. It's also just a rapid growth accelerator that you can drink. So definitely something else that I want to see people do more of, and you can find instructions for it here. But you'll know and you get it right when you have this beautiful blue color. And here's the instruction manual for that one. Again, I'm not going to sit here and read you the whole thing. You guys are perfectly capable of reading it, but I want to give you guys the recipe and dosing application. Again, using this at a 1 to 10 for foliar and a 1 to 20 for top dress. And then you can utilize the rest as labs at a 1 to 1,000 as a water or foliar. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the labs, and what happens is you have the curd at the top, the labs underneath, and you'll have a middle layer, which is this brilliant blue. And that's the part you're going to baste off to use for your super labs. All right. So plant labs. So you can combine things like the ideas of FPJ with lactobacillus, or things like this, the spirulina serum. Again, with lactobacillus, so you're dissolving those down with the lactobacillus to break them down and make those minerals hyper available in place of sugar in the case of FPJ, and relying on the IMO that's on there or whatever else. So this really can be a great way to rapidly break down plant material and kind of make like liquid compost that is much more bioavailable for your plants. So you can see here, we do, cannabis leaves all the time. Purslane is another really good one for trace minerals. Stinging nettle is amazing for not only for silica, but all your trace minerals, manganese, molybdenum, all that kind of copper, that kind of stuff. Horsetail is another one, often cited for silica. And then comfrey is another one, really good. And then beets and radishes, another really good one for ferments. People don't talk about them much. I don't know why. So FPJs, I think a lot of you guys have heard about FPJs before. Fermented fruit juice. So you're basically just taking fruits or plants and plant leaf material, weighing equal parts sugar and combining it. So if you had a kilo of plant material and a kilo of sugar, combine them and then allow that to sit for 7 to 10 days, and you should have a good liquid plant mix that you can dilute and use for your garden. And to further refine this, actually this kind of started after talking to a gentleman named Quan Con Pham in Vietnam. I've created a whole open source nutrient database where we just kind of scraped a bunch of nutrient data off of a bunch of different publicly available sources. A lot of stuff from Duke's, but also a lot of stuff from other places as well. It's all available on the opennutrientproject.com. You can select everything by what nutrient you're after, and it gives you everything in Latin name with a link to the source material, so that you can find whatever it is. If you're doing KNF, Jadam, compost teas, ferments, composting, whatever, you can now figure out what in your yard you can utilize. There's thousands and thousands of plants on there, so definitely check it out. I also have a nutrient testing database on there as well, so you can figure out what test kits that you need to test for. So if you want to test the liquid content of the nutrients of my potassium levels or my magnesium levels or my copper levels, there's a test kit on there for all that stuff, multiple ones linked to the manufacturer and everything else, so you have all the data that you need in order to properly utilize all that stuff, so that you can create your different inputs with knowledge about what the nutrients are going to be in that solution, and then quantify and test your solution after you've created it. We also have a button at the bottom of the page where you can submit that on a form, and then it goes into a publicly available database, and then the publicly available database is on there as well. So you can view what other recipes and preparations people have had, what the nutrient solutions came out to be, what the ppms came out to be for these different solutions. So we can start balancing these organic inputs in a much more intelligent way. I think people often assume that organic inputs, we can just forget that NPK is a thing. And that's just simply not true. We're just getting it from a different source. Like, we still have to pay attention. You still have to balance the stuff. It drives me wild sometimes how religious people get about nutrients, especially organic. I like to call it the religion of organics. People think organics that will, be our savior, that will solve all problems. And it's like, no, you still have to do the work. So something that I often see done wrong, but something we're trying to solve by putting out these types of tools like Open Nutrient Project. And you can see here, here's an example of the, whatever nutrient this was, and the different, levels. And this is all sorted by average minimum parts per million. So you're going to get the highest averages first. And then we also have open ones. So where we weren't able to get ppm data, here's just stuff that was out there and what's supposed to be in it and Latin name and all that, to try and give you as many resources as we can just in one place, so that you can, know better than what you need for your garden than I'll ever be able to know. Here's all the tools that you need to better quantify a better nutrient solution for your garden, so that you can create the best garden possible. Again, here's a testing database with the different nutrient ranges and all. I'll just give you an example. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. It's a great resource that I put a lot of time and effort into to try and solve a lot of these problems with, you know, getting all these different tribes of organic to talk to each other and work together on a common goal and a common solution. If you want to find out more about myself and all the hard work that people like myself do, you can find us all over the 3rd annual virtual Aquaponic Cannabis Conference, January 14th through and 15th, starting at 8 a.m. It's the 3rd one that we've done. You can find out the previous 2 years on the Aquaponics YouTube channel. And you can find out more about myself, APMJ class, if you want to take my aquaponic cannabis class, thepestclass.com for my pest control class, APMJ Newts if you need aquaponic fish safe nutrients. We have easy, kits for growing cannabis in there as well that are all fish safe, and low heavy metals. We do all heavy metal testing on all of our stuff 3rd party. So that's been a huge problem with other vendors, and we very much take that seriously. Nutrient class, if you want to take mineral microbe class. You can find out more on my website, aquaponics.com. We have a Facebook group, Aquaponic Cannabis Growers. Yeah, check out my podcast, Growing with Fishes podcast. We have over 700 hours of educational content. We've interviewed so many incredible people over the years, including many people that are no longer with us. So definitely check it out. And I appreciate all of you, and thanks for your time, and thanks for hanging out and listening more about aquaponics. Hope it was useful.